Hello. Thanks for choosing my oral tradition project. I am Chris Tanner, and we will be looking at the Tulalip First Salmon Ceremony. The Tulalip Tribe is a product of the 1855 Treaty of Point Elliott, crafted by Isaac Stevens, that relocated multiple different Coast Salish tribes onto one plot of land around Tulalip Bay and later established a boarding school to assimilate the children. After the Treaty of Point Elliott, Puget Sound was open to white settlers who came en masse, and commercial fishing boomed. The number of commercial non-Indian fishers grew more than 5 times between 1945 and 1960. In 1945, there were only 46 gill netters and 121 seine boats. And in 1960, there was almost 700 gill netters and 452 seine boats. And this boom in the fishing population adversely affected the salmon populations, which decreased drastically. So, in 1974, George Bolt of the Supreme Court ruled that the natives had access to 50% of the harvestable fish. However, there was still uproar among non-Indians who were commercial fishing and overfished to show their discontent. So Bernie Gobin here, pictured from a 2000 interview, said that there was no fish. We got 50% of something, but we didn't know what it was because it wasn't there. So even though the Supreme Court gave this ruling, Bernie Gobin and the other Tulalip elders knew that there was still work to be done to bring back the fish. So, a couple years later, Harriet Dover led the first salmon ceremony for any of the Tulalip people present. The elders knew that they had to renew the fish ceremony because they were the only people who knew that they needed to thank someone up above for the fish that returned each year. However, it was difficult because no one had ever done the salmon ceremony, and Harriet Dover could only go off of what she had heard about from her elders. This spiritual importance of the salmon ceremony put more emphasis on the native responsibility for saving the increasingly threatened fish populations so they would keep coming back to feed the people. The current story of the salmon ceremony has been adapted from Bernie Gobin's telling of the story, which has been updated to fit the narrative of modern struggles for both the salmon and the Tulalip people. It's a little too long to read here, so I have posted a link to it in the post description, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested in the full story. So, there are 3 main components to the first salmon ceremony. The first is welcoming the salmon. To do this, a procession of singing and drumming from all the people gathered at the longhouse meet the fishermen who caught the salmon on the shore, and then it's taken back to the ceremony site with more singing and drumming. Then the salmon is prepared, cooked, and eaten. The salmon is traditionally cooked on skewers next to an open flame. This allows the oil from the fish to slowly drip down and keep it moist. Each person attending gets a small piece of the ceremonial salmon, and a blessing is given before everyone eats, and then a second wave of feast with more salmon and many other dishes begins. At the end of the ceremony, the bones are brought back to the water by another singing and drumming procession and returned to the deep water of the bay. So, with the recent Bolt decision and renewed spiritual importance for the salmon, Bernie Gobin, with the help of other elders on the tribal council, and some federal funding as well, new construction for a fish hatchery began in 1982. Over the course of the next 35 years, the Tulalip hatcheries have added more than 275 million salmon back into the population. So, I see some similarities between the salmon ceremony and the Ute bear dance. Both the bear dance and the salmon ceremony mark the beginning of a new season. For the Utes, it's springtime and the end of winter, marking the beginning of active times of the year for everyone who stayed mostly indoors during the cold winter, and it wakes up the hibernating bears so that they can now begin their year as well. For the Tulalip, the first salmon ceremony marks the beginning of fishing season, the busiest time of year for the salmon people when they move to temporary homes along the rivers to catch fish for the year. In Gobin's version of the story of the salmon ceremony, he begins with what the ceremony comprised of in earlier times, when they returned all the fish bones out from all the salmon that they had caught. However, as time went on, the waters deteriorated and people stopped following the ritual, and he describes some of the challenges fish face due to changing times and influxes of settlers, commercial fishermen, and dams. The renewed ritual is meant for post-bolt generations to address the importance of maintaining healthy salmon populations for generations to come. Thank you for listening. I would encourage you to check out the story of the salmon ceremony, as well as Bernie Gobin's story in We Are the Salmon People, which can also be found on the Tulalip website.